Welcome to episode 122 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. It's Wednesday, October 7th, doing this a little bit late, a day late than we usually would. I'm here, Jake's here. We got a lot to talk about with this Ravens game. Almost said Redskins. I'm going to try not to. We made it through last week's episode without saying Redskins. We're going to try to do it again. The Washington football team. Ravens win over the Washington football team, 31-17. And the first thing I want to get into is, I don't know what I would call this, but just the fan reaction here this week. The Ravens won the game. They were supposed to win the game. Everyone thought they would win, and they did. It seems like some people were expecting a more dominant win. I predicted 44-10, I believe was a score prediction I gave. They didn't hit that, obviously. It was 31-17, but that doesn't mean I'm disappointed. That doesn't mean that I don't think they're a good team or they're not playing as well as they can consistently. I mean, the Ravens can win bigger, sure, but on a consistent basis, I don't know. It might be a little unfair that we're still judging things based on last year. And it's only 4 games in, but a 16-game season, I think 4 games is a decent enough stretch to start judging things on. And it comes down to a lot of things, like the Ravens, Lamar is not as electric. I mean, he's still pretty electric, but he's not where he was last year. And that's a combination of a bunch of different things. Maybe the defense isn't as, locked down. They're still forcing big turnovers, but they're giving up a lot of yards. It's a lot of little things. The run game is not as historic as it was last year. And I think that combined with the fact that they went 14-2, and that's pretty unlikely as it is, no matter how good of a team you are, to only lose 2 games through a season is pretty rare. So all of that mixed together, you come into 2020, and I think the expectations were just a little too high. And I don't say that. Usually when we say something like that, the expectations were too high. The current result is bad. That's not the case here. The current result is good. The Ravens are a good team. They're 3-1. So when I say the expectations were too high, I'm not meaning that as like an excuse or a negative. But as the season continues, can we get away from this, the Ravens have to win by 30 every week. Lamar has to be an MVP. They're not going to do what they did last year, but that's not important. The important thing is getting to the postseason, going deep in the postseason. So I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm sort of seeing this be kind of the general conversation, especially after this game against Washington, because it was a game, myself included, people thought would be a wider margin of victory.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you just said. I think it was far-fetched to expect, the Ravens to be steamrolling people every single week like they were, last season. And, I'm sorry, but if you're expecting the Ravens to go 14-2 or better again, you're going to be disappointed no matter what. I mean, it's extremely hard to go 14-2, let alone have all the good fortune, and they stayed relatively healthy last year. I think their health isn't being like too tested so far, but we're seeing, some guys, and they lost Tavon Young already, but I agree 100%, expecting this team to do exactly what they did last year. I mean, the NFL just doesn't work like that. I don't care who you are. And Lamar has gotten a full year's worth under his belt, which also means that, a lot of teams around the league have seen him. And I think it was a little bit to be expected that, teams are going to start defending Lamar much differently than they did last year. They probably picked up on a lot of things that Greg Roman's doing, and that's going to, force the Ravens to take a look at themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, how can they further develop this offensive system? And I think that's, a big reason why we heard Lamar say that the downfield throwing was so important for him to improve on, not just because that was something that was a relative weakness for him, something that, he could have done more often and gotten better at, But I think he realized that he had to start doing that because of how defenses were going to start to defend him. And, you add in losing, a key piece in Marshall Yanda, which is going to make things more difficult, not give you as much time to throw. And I think we're starting to see I don't want to say, I don't think struggle is the right word, because the Ravens scored, 31 points, and Lamar, he still had a touchdown pass. Did throw his first interception of the season. Believe it was his first one since the Bills game of last year. But it's also keep in mind too that this was had this been last year in this situation, I think the Ravens probably would have blown the Redskins, the Washington football team out. I didn't get the full word in there, up over half of it, almost the full word. But yes, Washington didn't have Chase Young. The Ravens didn't have Ronnie Stanley, so you're down, an offensive lineman, and DJ Fluker has to come in. But you also have this Redskins. I was doing it again. I'm not awake today. I think that's my excuse. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and I'm tired. The Washington football team, they were fighting hard for Ron Rivera, their coach. We saw obviously during the broadcast he was sitting down multiple times. We know he's going through some health concerns himself, but, and it's kind of funny to see if they're already making a quarterback change after 4 games. That just kind of goes to show you how quick they are to pull the plug down there. But yeah, I agree. I think it's a little unfair to expect everything that we saw last year from the Ravens. And I think that's why this upcoming Sunday against a division opponent, not that I'm worried, but the Ravens have to show up and play well if they want to get a win on Sunday against Cincinnati.
Right. And I think it's just, this team this year can accomplish a lot of great things, and years down the line could be considered better than the 2019 Ravens. It's still early to fully write that story, but that's just the truth. They are equipped to be better. And the point I wanted to make is it's unfair to keep viewing this team through the 2019 lens, even though your coaching staff is the same and a large majority of your roster is the same. You're only going to be disappointed if you keep doing that. And it's just not right. Like, this team won 31-17. That's a big win. Ignore if 2019 didn't happen, forget what happened last year. In a vacuum, 31-17, wow, that's a big win. The Ravens dominated. But if we compare it to last year, it could have been better. They didn't completely blow them out. They should have put up 40, and they should have held Washington to only 10 or something. It's just stop. You can't keep doing that. Same thing with the run game. They had 144 total yards. Lamar had the huge 50-yard run. Overall, all of the backs that got involved had pretty good averages. Dobbins had an average of just over 3, but he only had 5 carries. Edwards and Ingram were great. But if you look at that, only 144 yards. What's up with that? They should be getting at least 200 every week. Stop. You can't keep doing that. Like, it goes both ways too. Like, if you want to keep comparing it to 2019, well, what if I compare it to where the Ravens were just 2-3 years ago, where they were stuck in mediocrity every year? They were struggling to go 9-7 every year, never made the playoffs. They would put themselves in a position in the final weeks of the year and they would choke. If you want to compare it to that, this team looks amazing. If you want to compare it to 2019, they look a little less amazing. So let's get off of this. Let's get into what happened in the game. I guess I'll start with what happened before the game. During the week, Marlon Humphrey, if you want to talk about a consistent from last year to this year, him forcing turnovers, getting turnovers, whatever you want to call it, that's one consistent from last year to this year. He gets a big payday last week leading up to this game against Washington. We have the details of the contract now. 5-year extension. I can't remember the exact money, but it's a big contract, and it puts him.
I think it's 98.5, but I could be wrong.
Okay,
98.5, I believe, but don't quote me.
Right. if you want a comparison, it puts him behind only Jalen Ramsey. He's number 2. And we heard all these great things from Marlon, how he wanted to stay a Raven for life. Great stuff. You love hearing that. The money wasn't the most important thing to him, even though, let's be honest, he's not taking a huge discount here. He's still getting paid. In reality, he could have been the highest paid corner in the league, just with the way NFL contracts work. You're always one-upping the person that got the contract before you. So when Ramsey signed that deal, I think a lot of people were saying, well, if the Ravens are going to retain Marlon Humphrey, they're going to have to pay just as much, maybe a little more. In reality, they get him for a little bit less, so that's a positive. And then on top of that, another move here for DaCosta, signing someone mid-season. Just the second one that I can think of that was a really big contract, the other one being Marcus Peters last year, was signed right before the postseason, and that was a pretty big contract. All the other ones were smaller, Willie Snead, Pat Ricard, guys like that. And now you have Marlon Humphrey to go along with that. So this just seems to be DaCosta's MO at this point, signing guys mid-season, not waiting for the offseason. And what can I say? I mean, I'm extremely excited that Marlon's going to be here until he turns 30. It seems you're going to have him for the entire prime of his career. He's going to be paired with Marcus Peters for the immediate future. I love that. The last thing I'll say here, immediately paid dividends this weekend, forced another fumble. So I'm guessing you're probably on the same page here, excited that Marlon's going to be locked up for the next 5-6 years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's the thing I've always loved about, Marlon is he's a cornerback, and, he plays like a linebacker. He's, the next great Ravens defender, I think. And, you mentioned on Sunday, he made, another impact in the game with the turnover. And that's just whenever there's an offensive player in the vicinity of Marlon, whether it's, during or after the catch, you're always looking to see if he's going to punch the ball out. And oftentimes he does. I think we can talk about, just what you kind of outlined a lot of what the contract was and what it means for the Ravens. I mean, we all know that over the next 5-6 years, they're going to have a staple in their defense, a long-term player. And it's kind of great that he's only going to be 30 by the time his contract's over. They might even be able to retain him for a second contract after that. But I do think the conversation gets interesting for what it means for the other players the Ravens are going to be having to pay here pretty soon, or deciding who to pay. In my opinion, I think the writing's kind of on the wall for Matt Judon. I mean, we're even talking about, the Ravens possibly adding another pass rusher before the trade deadline, whether that's through free agency or a trade. You also factor in the fact that Ronnie Stanley was drafted a year before Marlon, and no long-term deal has come out of that yet. I think, Stanley, and he certainly has the right to feel this way, but if Laramie Tunsil down in Houston's getting over $20 million a year, I do not blame the Ravens at all if they don't go that far. Would I feel overly great about, Orlando Brown being then the long-term plan at left tackle? Maybe, but then you have to fill another hole on the right tackle side coming in, this offseason, or if they decide to tag Stanley next year, whatever the case may be. But I have a gut feeling that the Ravens just aren't going to budge and go that high, because we keep remembering, and we talk about very often, I would expect them, pending a serious injury to pay Andrews. I would expect them pending a very serious injury to pay Lamar Jackson, and those aren't going to be cheap deals at all. I think Andrews is probably going to be well over $50 million, and Lamar could be, I have no idea. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's where it gets interesting. I think that, it's a tough decision. I think Stanley is probably next in line behind Judon this year for a franchise tag, and whether they keep him or trade him, I have no idea. But while it's very exciting to have Humphrey here for the long term, I think we're starting to, figure out that, okay, maybe we have to start looking towards the future in regards to Ronnie Stanley.
Right, and I did want to talk about Stanley. I will just jump to that right now because we haven't really dug into the game yet. But Ronnie Stanley was not active this week. He has missed games here and there throughout his career. I should have the exact numbers in front of me. I don't. But I wanted to have this conversation about Stanley, and I'm glad you already kind of got the ball rolling, because I'm sort of at a point right now where I've done a 180 on him. I still like him as a player, think he's a fantastic left tackle, one of the best, if not the best in the league. But the conversation now becomes just how much is he going to command? And we just talked about it with Marlon. Everyone thought that he was going to get at least as much as Jalen Ramsey. He gets just a little bit less. If we view the same for Ronnie Stanley, he should be getting more than Laramie Tunsil, if not the same. I would be surprised to see him take less, but I don't know. And if that's the case, that's a lot of money for one guy. And it might sound crazy because we just praised the Marlon contract and all this stuff, but for me, with Stanley, last year may have been the first time he played a full season. He didn't play 16. He sat out the last week, but that was because they were resting starters, so I don't count that. But he has missed time because of little ticky-tack injuries throughout his career. He's had to come out of games and miss a drive, miss a quarter here and there. It seems like he's always getting banged up, and it's never been something season-ending, thankfully. It's never been something that holds him out for an extended period of time, but boy, is it annoying. And it's the same thing this week where he can't go. He can't play. And now here we are, the Ravens don't have their left tackle, and I'm okay if they want to tag him next year. That's still going to be a lot of money, but that's fine. But signing him long term, I'm kind of hesitant at this point, because when he does play, there's no denying it. He's good. But when you're going to allocate that much money to one guy, he's got to play. And I'm sorry, Stanley he misses too much time here and there for me to be comfortable giving him that much money.
Yeah, I have it in front of me here, actually. He's never played 16 games in a season. He played 12 his rookie year in 2016, 15 both in 2017 and 18. And last year he missed 2 games. You're right, he did miss the season finale, and then he also, I think he had a concussion for the Jets game last year, which was a Thursday night game after the Bills game. But I mean, it was the Jets, so it really didn't matter. But I agree 100%. It's unfortunate because he's one of the best left tackles in the game. When he's in, he's on. You really don't have to worry about the Lamar's blind side at all. But it seems like I need 2 hands to count on how many times every year that he gets dinged up during a game and has to miss a drive or have to miss a quarter, like you said. And especially if he's going to be asking for Laramie Tunsil money, which is ridiculous anyway. I mean, we have the Texans and Bill O'Brien to blame there for that, and he just got fired. So that kind of just goes to show how good he was at being a GM. But yeah, I don't think it's worth it. I would allocate that money to guys like Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, who to this point have been much more durable than Stanley. And if he it's not the Ravens' fault if he wants that money. I mean, there's nothing they can do. And he's certainly earned the right based on how he's played. If he feels like he should be the top paid left tackle in the league, I can't fault him for that at all. I just wouldn't, I wouldn't, if that's what he's asking for, me personally, and I think Eric DeCosta probably feels the same, I just want to do it. But then, like I was saying earlier, and I know if Orlando Brown is going to be your left tackle, then that's fine. I mean, he struggled for the first 3 games of the season, but actually played pretty well on Sunday, I thought, shifting at the very last second. So if he's going to be your left tackle, that's where he played in college, I can get behind that. I'm on board there. But then you've got to figure out what you're doing at right tackle, or if you're going to draft another left tackle very high and you keep Orlando Brown there, you've got a rookie playing in Stanley's old spot. So it'll get interesting. And I think the key is, Stanley obviously wants to stay healthy this year. Maybe that's part of, I was hearing too, that it was partly his decision to not play. And if it was, then maybe you have to think about, all right, is he, if he's feeling 50-50 and they're playing a team like the Washington football team, is he going to start thinking about these things and not putting himself at further risks so that he can get that big payday? I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. He definitely deserves the money from somebody. I don't know if that somebody is the Ravens, just like C.J. Mosley deserved that money he got every last cent of it. I didn't want it to be the Ravens to give it to him. So, that's just the way it goes. It should need no explanation in today's NFL. The other thing with Stanley is he plays at a position where it's very hard to find a replacement. Not every team in the NFL has a left tackle that they are even happy with, let alone one that you could consider the best at his position. So that's why you see this insane price tag attached to left tackle. It's really hard to find one in the draft. I mean, if you take one that you're confident in the draft, it's going to be in the first round, second round at the latest. Ravens kind of got a bit of a deal in that regard when they took Orlando Brown Jr., seeing as how he played left tackle in college and then transitioned to right tackle in the NFL. Finding a guy that could play both, or at least played left tackle, the premium position in college, they got him in, the third round? And there was some combine issues and concerns with him and whatnot, but still, you think for a position that's considered a premium, kind of crazy that Orlando fell that far, but whatever. The point I want to make here, everyone says left tackle so important, protecting the blind side for your franchise quarterback. If Lamar's your guy, you're going to pay him money, you should invest money into protecting him. That's a logical argument. But Ronnie Stanley alone is not going to keep Lamar upright. He might do his job to the absolute fullest, to what you would deem perfection. If the Ravens extend him for 5 years, in 5 years, he never gives up a single pressure. That's not going to happen, but let's say for the sake of argument it does. Ronnie Stanley can't control what the other 4 guys on the line do. They can give up pressure. They can give up sacks. Ronnie Stanley can do his job to the fullest, but he's just one guy. And that's not an indictment on him. That's not me saying that no team should pay him that money or no team should value him at that price tag. But at the end of the day, the success of an offensive line is a collective effort. And we saw it through the first 3 games. Lamar was sacked, 10 times in 3 games? Stanley was on the field for all 3 of those games, and he didn't give up any of the sacks, but the group did. So if you're going to pay to keep Ronnie Stanley, he might do his job, but now you have less money to invest in not only the rest of your team, you have less money to invest in your fellow offensive linemen. And now you're forced to hit on draft picks, which is not always the easiest thing to do. It's not something you want to corner yourself into doing. And the way that you build an offensive line to have such a lopsided contract dedicated to one guy where he can only block the guy in front of him.
And ironically enough, too, the offensive line had 1 sack and 3 quarterback hits. That's probably the offensive line. Their best performance of the season on Sunday against Washington without Stanley. And yes, the Ravens didn't have Stanley, but then Washington didn't have Chase Young, and that's all I heard going into Sunday was how dominant this Redskins pass rush was.
Yeah, this Washington front seven was kind of regarded as one of the toughest tasks for the Ravens so far this year, and maybe as the season continues, it'll still stand as one of the most formidable defensive fronts they face. I could be naive in saying that, but not having Chase Young was a big factor, but the rest of those guys are not scrubs. They've got some really talented guys there. Ryan Kerrigan been doing it at a high level for a long time. So the Ravens' offensive line, if we want to talk about the game itself, did a great job. Run game was going a little bit more. I don't think we had, outside of the Cleveland game, many major issues or concerns with the run game getting going. It just seemed like in that first game together, they weren't quite in sync in the Cleveland game, and then they come back against Houston, run the ball well. We know what happened against Kansas City. Had they stuck with the run, I'm sure it would have continued to succeed. And then here we have this week, the averages for Ingram and Gus Edwards were fantastic. Dobbins was okay. Again, 3.2 yards per carry. So offensive line looked like they finally put it all together this week. And like we said, oddly enough, without their best offensive lineman, they had their best day pass blocking and run blocking.
Yeah, I wanted to get into this a little bit too with the run game, because when the game was going on, Tyler, brought up some really good points, and we ended up having a long conversation about the running backs. It's obviously, when you've got, Lamar Jackson aside, when you've got Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and J.K. Dobbins all in your running back room, that's a great problem to have. But I think, not that I'm concerned, but I guess what I don't really understand sometimes is, I think, the Ravens have so many plays that are designed for a specific guy, a specific running back, that, while it's great that all three of these guys are getting playing time, I don't think that there's been one running back yet that's been able to really get into a groove. Gus Edwards has had some dominating runs. He's probably averaging around 6 yards a carry so far this season, which is great, but he's not the featured back. And I think the point Tyler was trying to make was, and I was kind of leaning that way too, is, okay, if you have these three guys, it's kind of clear, especially when they had him solely in at the end towards the game, that the coaching staff isn't ready to give J.K. Dobbins a featured role yet. He was basically rolling with RG3 there at the end, where he got all of his carries. And that's fine if he's not ready, but, I think it might be beneficial for the Ravens to maybe try to establish the run game early with their experience back in Mark Ingram, and then maybe not bring Gus in. You're obviously still going to give Ingram a breather in here and there, but I think where it could be nice for Gus is to start bringing him in midway through the third quarter and then into the fourth quarter, and just start running down people's throats, because that's what he does. And you want to, by that time, the thought is you want to be controlling the clock. So I know it's a very situational thing, but I wanted to get your thoughts on, the Ravens have these three running backs, but are they switching them out too often? And is it, the way things are designed right now, too hard for one of them to get into a big groove because they're constantly interchanging them between plays?
I think the getting into a groove thing is an interesting point, but I actually really like what they're doing, using all three at almost the same rate. You look at this game, 9 carries for Edwards, 8 for Ingram, 5 for Dobbins. That's pretty good, pretty evenly spread there, and what you would consider logical with Dobbins being the rookie. Still no touches for, I don't think a single touch this year for, oh my God, I can't even think of his name. Justice Hill. Has he been inactive?
He was on, he played, his first game was Sunday. I saw him on some kickoffs and some special teams plays, but that was it. Yeah,
I should have known that. He's probably been pretty involved with special teams, but he was a draft pick just a couple years ago, and now he's not really a part of the offense. But, like you said, it's good problems to have. But I do like mixing it up, because I think as the season progresses, that's going to be something that is the Ravens' strength. And I don't know if I want to say this is kind of where the NFL is going. I'm not quite sure. It's certainly nothing new, but having, a running back committee versus, a bell cow type of guy. Like, the Ravens don't have Saquon Barkley or Ezekiel Elliott or, Nick Chubb or somebody like that who can carry the ball every single time. Maybe Ingram could be that guy, but I think he's even better when you pair him with someone like Gus Edwards and now Dobbins. And it was almost like, if you go back to 2018, we kept talking about this being a Ravens strength down the stretch when they were winning all those games. They had Gus Edwards, who was performing way better than anyone thought he would. And then you got Dixon back from his injury. And now you say, we got two guys that can carry the ball. They can trade it off back and forth. And Dixon has been, hasn't played all year. His legs are fresh. So I think as we get into the later months of the season, you're going to look at Edwards, Ingram, and Dobbins. None of them have carried the ball to the point where some of these other featured backs in this league have. Their legs are more fresh. And as long as all three of them stay healthy and available, When the Ravens get into December and then January, as we think they will, they're going to have 3 fresh guys running at you, giving you different looks. Ingram and Dobbins are obviously a threat to catch a pass out of the backfield. So I think that's going to be a strength for them. And I would compare it to what the 49ers have done in recent years, where they just have this insane running back committee with a really talented fullback in Juszczyk. The Ravens have a really talented fullback in Pat Ricard. So I think that committee is their strength.
Yeah, and obviously this will be a thing that, keeps developing as the season goes on. And I mean, like you were saying, if should one of them go down, then you can plug in Justice Hill there as well. And it's kind of, he got hurt during camp, so that's kind of out of their control. But he was a draft pick. I think he was a 4th rounder in 2019. So kind of crazy on how quickly he's faded out of the offense. But drafting J.K. Dobbins in the 2nd round will have a lot to do with that. But yeah, and I guess that's counter argument to what I was trying to say of trying to get one of these guys established early and then maybe interchange them a little bit more later on. But then you run into the argument of maybe Ingram or whoever's leg isn't going to be as fresh later in the season. And I think another positive by later in the year is you also hope that Dobbins takes some steps forward by that point too. But yeah, I just don't think that so far. And a lot of it has to do with the game plan the Ravens have implemented with passing the ball more. They got back to the run, obviously on Sunday with, Lamar only attempting 21 passes and then 32 rushes total for the team. So, and we all know the Bengals defense is pretty terrible too. So maybe they'll have an opportunity to get the ground game going a little bit more this weekend. But yeah, definitely we haven't seen a dominant running back step forward yet. But I mean, they've got 3 talented guys, so maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Like I said, I think Ingram could be that guy, that you're giving the 15 carries to every game. He was that guy at times last year. It's not like he can't do it. And it's not even like, oh, we have to keep his legs fresh because he's old. I'm not saying that either. You could easily give him the carries. But when we get to December and he is fresh and he's more fresh than the average running back in the league, that's only going to benefit the Ravens. And I'll save the Bengals point for later when we preview that, because that is a good point. And Lamar, just to tease that, has had probably 2 of his most electric games running the ball against Cincinnati last year, just to preview that. Other offensive points here for the Ravens, Lamar was decent, obviously better than he was against Kansas City, only threw 21 passes, just under 200 yards. The 2 touchdowns to Mark Andrews, great passes, especially the first one on the run when he slung the ball downfield. The camera's moving with the ball. I didn't know if there was going to be a guy there waiting for it, and sure enough, Andrews, heck of a catch, amazing throw on the run. And Lamar wasn't perfect with those throws on the run. He missed Hollywood, I think, twice. Hollywood still had a huge day, but there was a couple more passes where it just seemed like the rhythm was off, overthrew his guy, stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, I think we can all agree that Lamar is getting better throwing the ball not only from the pocket but on the run. And you look at some of those misses, if you can look into the future and say that, hey, 4 or 5 weeks from now, they're going to be hitting on all those every single time, or at least the ball is going to be put in a place where the receiver has a shot to catch it instead of overthrowing him. That's a scary thought for how good this offense can be, and especially Lamar as a passer. We can talk about the interception too, but on the day, his stats not super flashy, but I was impressed with what I saw in the red zone too.
I guess an interesting thing about Hollywood is that, obviously it was great for him to, get as involved as he did. I think we were kind of waiting for him to have a game like he did on Sunday. But it's also kind of interesting. He has not scored a touchdown so far this season. And the last time he actually got in the end zone was the Thursday night Jets game last year. So that would make it 7 straight games, including the playoff game against Tennessee in the postseason without a touchdown for Hollywood. But yeah, not too much else to say about the passing game. I mean, it's clear that, Marquise and Mark Andrews are the top targets for Lamar. I mean, really, the other guys I mean, Duvernay had one reception yet again. Kind of surprising that Willie Snead hasn't gotten more involved. I think for me, a lot of people saw him in camp as being in great shape and dropped a couple pounds. I think I was expecting a little bit more out of Willie Snead, but maybe that was kind of far-fetched because, I mean, in reality, even though Snead is the longest tenured veteran by far in this wide receiver room, he's been a career, number 3, number 4 receiver. So maybe I had a little bit too much hope there. And Boykin had 2 receptions as well for 28 yards. But do you have any, concerns about Lamar constantly not getting to 250 passing yards, which seems to be, pedestrian for the average NFL quarterback? Does that concern you at all?
No, because it's all game situation. But I know what you're saying because we saw it last year. I mean, if we look up his game log, I'm sure there's plenty of games where he was, hovering around 200. And if you're only going to throw the ball 21 times, it's all situational. You're going to run the ball more like they did this week. You're going to have a week where the fan base is begging you, please run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And then the result of that is Lamar can still have a good game, but he's going to be around 200 yards. So I don't have a huge problem with it. It's more so about a higher completion percentage for me. Completion percentage on crucial downs like 3rd down, 4th down when they go for it and throw the ball. That's what's important to me. Red zone, if he's only going to attempt, 20 to 25 passes a game, I want a high completion percentage. I want high efficiency in the red zone. I want him to make, precision throws on 3rd down. That's what's important to me. The yardage total doesn't concern me because he's going to add 50 on the ground, including a game-breaking play like he had here this Sunday against Washington.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, and that's obviously a fair point considering that some of his yards do come on the ground. I just think it'll be a little bit important for him to increase his passing totals a little bit solely based on the fact that, aside from that long run on Sunday, I think defenses are starting to defend the run, particularly against Lamar, a lot differently than they did in the past. And I broke it down real quick on my iPad here. He's reached 250 passing yards 5 times, 4 of them last season. And then the only time he's done it this year was when he threw for 275 against Cleveland 3 weeks ago. But then he hasn't gotten he had 204 yards against Houston, but then 97 and 193 last week. But I agree with that. It's a lot of it's game situations, but I think it is fair to note though that as Lamar advances throughout the NFL and starts to become more of a veteran, and as he starts to rely on his legs less, I would expect him to get those total passing yards totals up a little bit and above 250 more frequently.
Right, and then if I know we just spent a lot of time griping about not comparing things to 2019, but if you do look at what they did last year, and that was an MVP season for him, it was so hard to predict what they were going to do. And you have week 1 where you had a whole off season of everyone saying, oh, he's a running back, he's still not a good passer, comes out, throws the ball just up and down the field, deep passes, short passes, just carving up that Dolphins defense. He had other games where he was passing, insane passing stats. Was it 5 passing touchdowns against the Rams? So he'll have games like that, and then he'll have like a game, I think the first game against the Bengals last year, where he ran the ball maybe close to 20 times. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. And I agree with you, moving forward, it's going to probably even out. And at some point in his career, it's going to be consistently, yes, he's dropping back to pass most of the time every week. But if you still have that threat of, if you're an opposing defense, you're standing there saying, is this going to be the game where he carries it 20 times? Or is he only going to carry it 5 times? It keeps you on your toes. So I think for his longevity's sake, I agree with you. But where he is right now in his career, the strength that he provides is being unpredictable, and the Ravens' offensive game plan being unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to go up against, really.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops as his career goes on. Did you take too much? I mean, I guess, defensively, it was, finally good to see Matt Judon get in the backfield a little bit. I think he had 2 sacks, if I remember correctly. And then, they obviously had the Marlon Humphrey turnover as well. But did Peters pick off Haskins at one point, or was that the previous week? Okay.
No,
he recovered the fumble. That's all I was thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what did you think of? As far as like defensively, aside from Judon, because that's kind of the key one there. Calais Campbell batted down another pass, which seems like he's doing that at least once a week now. And the Ravens also, they had some scares defensively, and as far as injuries go, with Deshaun Elliott and Patrick Queen leaving the game at various points. I think I was more concerned about Elliott. I thought it looks like he could have broken his collarbone there on that hit. Queen kind of just looked like literally like a helmet got slammed into his knee. Like I didn't think it was like an ACL or anything. I thought if anything, it might have left a huge bruise. And obviously the injury report is going to start to be coming out today as they practice Wednesday. But yeah, obviously they avoided two scares there. They don't need to be losing anybody else in the secondary or linebackers. That's for sure.
No, absolutely. That Elliott one, that got me, because you saw him get up from that hit and his arm's just hanging there. It's just hanging. You're saying, oh my God, he broke his collarbone, dislocated his shoulder, something. If it's the look on his face, the way he was holding his arm.
His arm fell off of his body completely.
It just made me think of Toy Story, with Buzz takes his arm off.
I am Mrs. Nesbit.
That's a classic film series right there.
But yeah, it was a scary hit, and then all of a sudden I look up and it's a quarter later and he's running and making the same type of tackle. He's running full speed and knocking someone out of bounds, and I said, oh hey, Deshaun Elliott's back in the game. How about that? Definitely that would have been, had he gotten injured significantly there, where he would have had to miss games moving forward, or anything like season ending. That's immediately my mind went to that, just based on his track record. And you're saying, oh my God, can this guy catch a break? He worked so hard to get to this point. We have this weird situation with Earl Thomas. Now he's the starter. And if he went down with an injury, oh my God, that would have been awful. But you're sitting there saying, who are they going to replace him with? So the fact that they avoided that was huge. But we will talk about the defense here, like you said. Pass rush got going a little bit more. 3 sacks, 2 for Judon. The one, he wasn't even blocked. Easiest sack he's going to get all year. But for a guy that I think has been used in a lot of creative blitz schemes this year, just watching the games, he's, not just lining up on the end of the line. Wink has got him dropping back and then rolling around and coming through the middle. Judon's been moving around the field a lot this year, and he's come close in previous games but never gotten home with a sack. So for him to be rewarded with, an untouched sack where no one blocks him, I'll take that. I'll give that to him. He deserved that for how much he's being used in creative ways this year. And I still think he'll get his total. I don't know if he'll hit double digits, but he'll probably still land around 8 or 9. That's my guess. I think the only hope you have is that they're just evenly spread. There's no games where he has 3 sacks and then he goes 5 weeks without a sack. That's what we're trying to avoid here, because everyone, not everyone, but one of the big things everyone's talking about is the pass rush. And it looked like they got some things going this week. It wasn't just the 3 sacks. It was just having a presence in the backfield, forcing Haskins to make errant throws, make mistakes, roll out when he didn't want to, take the check down when he didn't want to. That's all important. That's stuff that you don't see in a stat sheet. It's contextual in that point, but I think people are fair to say that this team needs to add a pass rusher. I don't disagree with that. Where do you fall on that, by the way? Do you want them to add somebody, trade for someone?
I mean, I think if we're going to be talking about the Ravens getting past the hump and beating Kansas City, I think, I think they might need to make a move there. And it's not like they're going to have to give up a ridiculous, amount of draft capital. I mean, we saw Eric DeCosta fleece a fifth rounder or give up a fifth rounder, I think, and Kenny Young to the Rams for Marcus Peters last year. So, stranger things have happened, and I think it'll be, interesting to see I know the trade deadline is going to be coming up here in a week or two. But I think that's probably the biggest area on the team that probably could use an upgrade. And then you could maybe also throw a wide receiver into that conversation as well. And I know, we don't have to get into it again today, but I know like the topic of the Ravens adding somebody who we've talked about plenty, and not just him, but other names out there too, just that conversation just not going away because, Hollywood Brown did come out this week, but the wideouts really haven't done much to this point. It's been a lot of Mark Andrews. And somehow with the running backs and Lamar as well. But I do think that if there's one area that the Ravens can upgrade to make a serious push for the postseason and for a championship, I think it's got to be pass rusher, because we just haven't seen the production, especially from the outside guys. And I understand the conversations that we had all off season of Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe impacting the interior, but I mean, Derek Wolfe's hurt now, and these guys are both well above the age of 30. I mean, they can't be counted on to, just like Brandon Williams, they can't be counting on to consistently be getting in the backfield with no help from the outside at all. So, Judon's going to have his stretches of good games. He's not going to go, he might be on a milk carton for a few weeks. That's just the type of player he is, but I could also see them not making any moves. But whether I'm going to lean one way or the other, it's kind of tough, because I think are several areas that they're going to need to address in the draft. And I don't know how I feel about giving up capital, but if this is their window and they're looking to win now and win a championship now, they might not have a choice but to, maybe part with a third or fourth rounder to get a significant pass rusher or something. I'm not saying do anything crazy, like give away a first round pick. Like that I would not be on board for at all. But I do think it's very possible that DeCosta, being the aggressive guy that he is, looks to add in that department over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that he is on the phone having conversations. Whether something gets done or not, we'll just have to wait and see. But based on everything we've seen from DeCosta so far, I would say it's a pretty safe bet to say that he's trying to wheel and deal a little bit. And I do trust him, like you said, to not give up a first-round pick. And even if it comes to like a second-rounder, for him to be pretty hesitant about it. You look at some of the big trades they've made, to get Calais Campbell, to get Marcus Peters last year. I mean, those were ridiculous one-sided trades. You gave up a fifth-rounder and Kenny Young for an all-pro cornerback and Marcus Peters, and then you give up a fifth-round pick for Calais Campbell, who's just, despite his age, still one of the best at his position and a one-man wrecking crew. I've called him that countless times this year, but you look at everything he does, if he's not getting in the backfield on a pass rush, he's sticking his arms up and batting down a pass. He's an absolute force against the run. You cannot run against him. Anything is on the table, and I am okay with them adding a pass rusher at the trade deadline, because I think I agree with you. That is the one area where they could significantly get better. One other thing here, it's not the pass rush, but same type of players, the defensive line, and I guess the linebackers as a unit. Against the run this year, I don't think people are talking about this enough. Fantastic against the run this year. And look at some of the backs that they faced. Week 1, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, both of them were held in check. Certainly a big factor in that was the Ravens getting out to a lead. We saw it plenty of times last year. We know the formula. We know how it goes. The Ravens get out to a lead. The opponent has to pass more, especially in the second half. They, in turn, get away from the run game, so there's less carries. But still, from what we've seen, the Ravens have done a really good job keeping big-time guys like Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, both of them held in check. I know he's just a rookie, but Edwards-Helaire last week got nothing on the ground. He was a factor in the pass game on screen passes. He was a huge factor. But as far as him running the ball, he got nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the Chiefs would have loved to have gotten anything out of him because they're trying to protect the lead, run the clock out, and they had to resort to passing the ball probably more than they would have liked to. Ended up working in their favor still, but as you throw in the Houston game with that, throw in this week against Washington, both of those teams, no prominent, scary running back, a huge running back threat, but still the results are still dominant. What they do in the pass game, I'm ignoring that. I'm talking about strictly running because we know giving up screens right now is a bit of a weakness for this defense as well. But I did want to give this defensive line their credit because it was the hot topic all offseason after what Derrick Henry did in the postseason game. This team has to stop huge running days for these elite running backs. And they've only faced a couple you could consider elite, mainly Nick Chubb. And I think that's a great sign moving forward because Nick Chubb is hurt now, but might be back by the time the Ravens play them again. If not, Kareem Hunt, still just as big of a threat. You're going to have to face Derrick Henry again this year. You're going to have to face Joe Mixon this week and down the road. Ezekiel Elliott with Dallas. There's some elite rushers that this Ravens defense is going to have to be tasked with stopping throughout this season. And I think it's encouraging to see the way they perform so far.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And because they're going to be needing to face Mixon coming up this weekend, I mean, before this past Sunday against Jacksonville, he didn't have above 69 rushing yards, but he broke loose against Jacksonville as Cincinnati took them down 33-25. He had 151 yards on 25 carries and 2 touchdowns, averaging 6. So the Bengals offensive line is not very good, but if the Ravens, the weakness for the Ravens defense really is in the screens. And if Burrow finds, I don't know what the Bengals do as far as screens go. I know they still have Gio Bernard there as well, but if he finds Mixon or Bernard, I mean, the Ravens are going to be tasked with stopping one of those guys. So I'm not as concerned as we look, before their bye coming up in week 7. I'm not as concerned about Philadelphia coming up next weekend, but I do think that, while the Bengals offensive line has had its fair share of struggles this season and in the last couple of seasons as well, I do think that, Joe Mixon presents a challenge for the Ravens front 7 and the defensive line to be able to stop on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about the Bengals game. I said it last week of this 3-game stretch. They scare me the most. Joe Burrow's just throwing the ball left and right. He's not afraid to make any pass. It might end up biting him, in the long run, more turnovers and whatnot, kind of like what we saw with Baker Mayfield early in his career, just not being afraid to make every throw, and it results in more interceptions. Could be the same for Burrow, but that's still a threat. That type of guy is always going to pose a threat to you. The Ravens saw it with Baker Mayfield. He had pretty good success against them, picking up a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. He did throw a lot of picks against the Ravens, but still always put his team in a position to win or won the game. I'm even going to look at Kyler Murray last year in the Arizona game. As a rookie, making one of the first starts in the NFL, I think, what was that, that was week 2. He was throwing the ball all over the place, making what we would conventionally call a dangerous pass, but it was working for him. And sometimes there's something to be said about the fearless quarterback who will make throws that other quarterbacks just don't make. And sometimes it'll come around and be a bad thing for them, and it'll bite them. And you're hoping a guy like Marcus Peters or Marlon Humphrey or really anybody in the secondary can take advantage. But I'm just saying, we've seen it around the league and particularly with the Ravens in the last couple of years. Facing a young rookie quarterback who's not afraid to make every throw it can be a rough day for them, and they might give up a lot of yards. I think the key is just going to be containing Burrow in the red zone, preventing scores, obviously holding them to field goals, trying to generate a turnover or two to keep things in check. But I got to tell you, I mean, him as a passer alone is a threat to me right now. And you look at the weapons he has with Boyd, A.J. Green is still there, not what he was when he was a Ravens killer years ago, but still, you got to keep an eye on him based on what he's done to you in the past. And then Mixon. I mean, the number's not there consistently, but he's been that guy. You know, they paid him for a reason. So Burrow's got the weapons, doesn't have the offensive line, but this is a matchup that should be an interesting one for the Ravens. And like I said, it would not surprise me if they gave up a lot of chunk yards on Sunday.
Yeah, it's always interesting against divisional opponents. I can't really imagine this one being a shootout. I mean, the Bengals, that, you know, they do have a lot of, you know, weapons in the passing game, and Joe Mixon is no slouch either. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it all depends if the Ravens pass rush shows up. If Matt Judon has himself another good game, then maybe the Ravens can contain the Bengals. You know, I do think it also has the potential to not necessarily be a shootout, but be like a I guess mid to low high scoring game, if you want to call it that. You know, I do think both teams will score. I don't think it's going to be like a dog fight, a low scoring game. You know, both these defenses tend to give up a lot of yards, so I do think, you know, points will be there for both teams. But I'm still going to go with the Ravens 27-20 here, and get the win and advance to 4-1.
Yeah, I'm taking the Ravens as well. I think they put up at least 30. You know, this Bengals defense is garbage, absolute garbage. If they had even a half-decent defense this year, they would have more than one win right now. I mean, they do have that tie, so they came close against Philly. But I'm telling you, with the way Burrow's throwing the ball and the way that offense is getting things going, their offense is scoring despite their weakness as an offensive line, their defense is just holding them down at an insane rate. I mean, it's like what we're seeing with Dallas. I think the Ravens put up at least 30. It'll just be interesting how much Burrow can lead the Bengals offense to scoring. I'll say 33-20, Ravens win. And I guess we'll leave it at that. I do want to say this is going to be awkward to close on this, but we would be making a big mistake if we did not talk about Sam Cook and the fake punt. Gotta throw this in here at the end. What a decision. Nothing new for the Ravens and John Harbaugh being the special teams mind that he is. Ravens have often gone with these fake punt passes. Sam Cook is now 7 for 7 in his career. That's crazy. Perfect execution by Cook. Threw the ball before, Boykin even turned around. I mean, that's awareness that you don't even see from some quarterbacks in this league, to throw the ball and lead a receiver like that. Throw it before he's even 100% open. That's just comes from insane practice. And credit to Sam, credit to Boykin for selling it like he was running down the field as a gunner and then stopping on a dime and catching the pass. Great play all around.
Yeah, and if I encourage everybody to, if you haven't seen the Ravens media team put up like a quick minute-long video on YouTube of the highlights of all of Sam Cook's completions, and they made like a little meme out of it, put like some fake sunglasses on him at the end. It was pretty comical. I encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to go check that out on the Ravens website, and I saw it on YouTube, but it's probably on their website as well.
One last thing here. I saw this from Patrick Gleason with the Ravens. He's always got great stats and tidbits after games. Sam Cook, 7 for 7, like we said, 82 yards on those passes. That's a passer rating for his career, 115.5. That's a Hall of Fame passer right there. And this other thing is pretty interesting. This past weekend in this game against Washington, moved into a tie with Ray Lewis for the second most games played as a Raven. That was game number 228 for him. So Ray played in 228. Sam Cook has played in 228. And barring something catastrophic, knock on wood, In 2 weeks, Sam Cook will have played the most games in Ravens history. The record is 229, held by Terrell Suggs. So he will tie that this week against the Bengals, and in 2 weeks against the Eagles, he will have played the most games in Ravens history.
Who knew it would be a freaking punter? I'm
having a hard time wrapping my head around it, but I guess Ray missed some time with injuries, and that held him back. Same thing with Suggs. He was out for like 2 season-ending injuries. So I guess Sam Cook, he's been here since I don't even know when, but that makes sense.
I think 2006 was his rookie year, but you don't typically see punters and special teams guys. I mean, the Ravens have been so dominant with special teams. I guess it shouldn't become as too big of a shock, but you don't typically see punters hang around for 15 seasons. So that's pretty impressive.
Especially with the same team. I mean, even if they're in the league that long, they're bound to jump around to different teams. So,
well, that's what I meant too. Like you don't typically see them for on one team for that long. It's pretty remarkable.
Right. So we'll leave it on that. Leave it on a high note with future Hall of Fame quarterback Sam Cook. That's episode 122. Thanks for listening as always, and we will talk to you next week following the Ravens game against the Bengals.